Good evening, Chattanooga Film Festival. Welcome back. I'm here with Jonathan Barkhan, director of upcoming project Mental Health and Horror documentary. First of all, can we talk about how awesome it is that Fangoria is presenting this talk? I mean, I know that you and I have gushed over them for years because they're fucking amazing. It's something that has been integral in our part. So
Yeah, no, Fangoria is uh one of those words that just conjures up history and legacy. And uh it's one of those things that when I was told that Fangoria was presenting this panel, it was one of those what is my life moments where I'm sitting here like I've been in this industry for over 12 years, and I still get those feelings of just appreciation and joy and love and excitement I and giddiness. I'm still that little boy when these things happen, and that was absolutely one of those moments. And the fact that Fangoria is full of people that I love and that I respect and who are doing such amazing things, uh, it's it's in a way very affirming, but it's also very humbling that they looked at this and went, yes, this fits with what we're doing, with what we're trying to say, with what we're trying to put out there. And I could not be more grateful and appreciative.
well, since you brought it up, what are you trying to say? What's this new film?
So, mental health and horror documentary is, as the name suggests, it's a documentary about the positive impacts that horror can have on those living with mental illnesses. So, it's the idea was born when I was, funny enough, standing next to Phil Nobile Jr. from Fangoria, behind the cameras on Sam Weinman's queer horror doc. My wife, Ariel Fisher, was doing an interview, and I was just standing there. And then we got to stay a little bit after that and watch the director of Jawbreaker do a segment. I'm not sure if I can announce that, but there we go. But something that was said just triggered this reaction in me, and I went to the back corner of the soundstage, and I always carried you know before the pandemic, when I would go out in the real world, I always carried this little just journal, this little booklet where I'd scribble down notes and ideas and thoughts. And I pulled it out, and I always carry a pen with me, and I just started furiously scribbling down. Uh-oh.
I think
Am
you,
I?
I think you froze, but you froze in like the most perfect position.
Oh, this is just the worst.
Just sitting there like this.
Give me a second. Hang on.
My favorite.
Hang on. There
There
we go.
you are. You're back.
I'm back, and I'm gonna hold this position for the rest of the interview. um, but yeah, so I had that journal, I had that pen, I started scribbling everything down, and it was this just outpour of ideas. It was everything. It wasn't just let's do a documentary about the positive impacts of horror on those with mental illnesses. It was also, who can I talk to? What are the resources that I know of? How would I break this apart? What would the structure look like? By the time I was done, I had pages of notes, and this was all in like 10, maybe 15 minutes. And so I was holding on to that idea for a little while, and I approached a few people that expressed a lot of interest, but nothing could really be done as we were in the midst of the pandemic. And then earlier this year, I want to say maybe January or February, I reached out to Andrew Hawkins, who at the time was with Creator VC. And I said, look, I know you've had a lot of experience with documentaries, especially ones that embrace the horror community. And I would just love to get your thoughts on this. Andrew took a look at it, and he immediately sent me a Zoom link and was like, we need to discuss this. We need to see how we can make this a reality. And so we just started pushing and going and building the team and getting everything together. And it wasn't until pretty recently that I had a mental shift, because at first I was like, okay, this is all fun and games, and it's all great and whatever, but it's not real.
Right.
And then I don't want to say that it was the Fangoria announcement, but it was very, very close to the Fangoria announcement where I was like, holy shit, this is real. This is something we're actually doing. And the excitement and joy and glee fell on me, mixed with unfathomable terror and burden and obligation, because this is a really sensitive subject. And it's something that is really important and personal to a lot of people. And if I don't approach it with the honesty and transparency and integrity that it deserves, then it's going to have the opposite effect, which is the worst possible outcome for something like this.
Yeah, and so speaking of that, what are some of the ways that you've built your team? You mentioned your team. How have you built this team to kind of make sure that you're taking into account all of the precautions of like possible triggering material, both in the audience and also with your interview subjects? Because I imagine that this is going to get it will probably touch on a lot of very heavy topics.
Yeah, that was something that was incredibly important to me from the very beginning. You know, I'm always paying attention to what people are talking about online, with what they want to see, with what they are missing, with what they feel is lacking from the film community, from TV, from anything. And one of the big things that I kept seeing was that there was this lack of diversity when it comes to documentaries, that we had really informed and incredible voices that were appearing, but it was a lot of, you know, the same white people over and over and over. And I agreed with that, because I watched horror noir and I said to myself, this is incredible. This is something that is so important, and it talks about Black cinema from the voices that should be talking about it. And I loved that, because that's what I needed to hear. I didn't need to see, you know, another white person talking about Black cinema, because that wouldn't be authentic. And so when I was talking about the goals that I had for mental health and horror, one of the very big ones was that I wanted that kid in the middle of nowhere who didn't have access to a lot of mental health resources because of their surroundings and because of their community. There might not be a lot of people who love and appreciate horror the way that they do, so they feel very alone. I wanted them to know that there is a community out there for them. But in order to make that a really honest kind of representation and presentation, when I said that that kid in the middle of nowhere, I need to recognize that that kid in the middle of nowhere could be anyone. It could be a queer Black youth. It could be a non-binary Indigenous person. It could be anyone. It could be a straight white person, but it could be anyone out there. And so if that kid in the middle of nowhere needs to see themselves represented, then it's up to me to be able to create that kind of representation in front of and behind the camera. So you asked about creating the team. You know, it started out with myself and Andrew Hawkins, and we're both white men. You know, I'm Jewish, which for some is a minority. For others in the film community, it's kind of par for the course.
Right.
But you know, it's still, you know, it still is a minority when looking at global populations. But then I recognize that right now we have two men, so we need to expand into finding some women. And Andrew actually brought Alice Collins to us, a trans woman who has been invaluable and is doing so much for us. I'd been talking with BJ Colangelo for a long time about this project, and she was all aboard as producer, and with her experience with trauma counseling, with helping youth, and also just with her knowledge and experience, she is actually going to be the resource for every one of our interviewees when they're done. If they're not ready to go back into the world, if they're in a dark place, because as you said, things can get heavy. If they are deeply affected, then she is there specifically to talk to them and bring them back and help them and talk them through what they're feeling, so that they can leave the interview maybe not at 100%, but definitely not at, you know, in a really dark and terrible place. So it's really important to make sure that we engage in care and aftercare. And then we also have Zena Dixon, a Black woman who is just a powerhouse when it comes to social media. And she's so successful with her YouTube career and being the co-host of the Bloody Disgusting podcast. She just is so ingrained in the horror world, in the horror sphere. And she's talking about things from her perspective, which is inherently different from
Mhm.
anyone else's. And that's what I appreciate and value so much. Um, and so every member of the team brings something that is invaluable, not only from their experience, but also that they're able to hold me accountable. That if they see me stumbling, that I use improper language, or I said something that is offensive, or anything like that, I've told them and I've empowered them to hold me accountable because I need to be held accountable so that we can make sure this is done right.
Yeah. Um, so you talked a little bit about your audiences that you're doing this for. So obviously there's a huge audience. I think that you and I consider ourselves part of it, of horror fans that have some kind of mental health issues that we deal with on a daily basis. I think that honestly I feel like it's a stigma that should go away, because
Yeah.
I feel like almost everybody's dealing with some kind of mental issue, especially after the last year that we've all been through.
Yep.
So other than like horror fans that are dealing with mental health, who else, what other audience do you think that this film could help empower, or even kind of maybe even bring into the community?
Yeah, that's a great question, because we fully recognize that horror has plenty of stigmas and negative stereotypes attached to it. And that's one of the other big goals, is to combat those mentalities, to kind of directly address moral panic. And it doesn't make sense to rally up the horror community to say that, because we've been saying it for years. It's nothing new that we are standing here screaming, we're not evil, we're not violent, we're not bad people. We just like something that tackles art
Mhm.
and social commentary in a different way. And that's all that there is to it. Um, so the audiences that we have in mind, obviously, audience number one, the core audience, are going to be the horror fans that are living with mental illnesses. Then outside of that, in equal parts, it's the horror fans that don't have mental illnesses, and then also the people with mental illnesses that may not be horror fans, but are looking for something that may be an approach that they haven't tried. We're not suggesting that this is medication. We're not suggesting that this is a replacement for therapy. We're saying that this is another tool that you can add to your toolbox that may be able to help you, that may be able to tackle what you're dealing with from an angle that you hadn't thought of. Outside of that group, we are also looking at the family, the friends, the loved ones of those living with mental illnesses, because a lot of times they don't have the vocabulary, they don't have the language to discuss what someone is going through in a healthy way. They say things from their perspective, but that might not be what these people need to hear. And that's not a negative. That's not a, me wagging my finger at those people who are trying. Bless them for trying. We appreciate you and we love you for doing that. It's just that the the intention may not match the execution.
Mhm.
And so we're just saying, we're empowering you with this documentary to hopefully give you the language to help us. And then the last group of people that we really hope to reach with this is the next generation of mental health professionals, the providers, the therapists, the psychologists, the psychiatrists, who, when they're talking with someone who says, I love horror movies, even though I am diagnosed with anxiety or depression or bipolar, rather than say horror is exacerbating this, they can look at it and say, okay, let's dive into that. Let's see how we can use horror to help you. If you're dealing with grief, let's look at something like The Babadook so that we can recognize that grief never really leaves. But
Mhm.
if you don't address it, if you don't face it head on, then it's going to grow into this monster that attacks you and hurts you. But if you embrace it, if you face it head on, if you nurture it in a way, then yeah, it's still there, but it can't hurt you. It's just something that you have to live with.
Right.
And I think that's a really important thing to recognize, is that horror very often tackles those really difficult topics in ways that are unorthodox, but
Mhm.
they're only unorthodox because the masses have deemed it so.
Right. Now, so obviously, like this is you're still early in the process. I know that you've done a couple interviews. The Kickstarter just launched this week, but how do you see this documentary? Is this a broad view? I mean, the subject matter is so vast on this.
Yeah.
Is this a broad look, or is this focusing on a couple aspects, or is it kind of a combination of the two? What again? I've done my share of documentaries, and I've obviously I love documentaries are something that I throw on at work almost every single day. And so I know that a lot of it's not figured out until you understand what you have. But how do you see it right now, in terms of like what is the scope?
Yeah, the scope is because there are so many mental illnesses, it's impossible to directly try and address all of them because what we would be doing is scratching the surface, if that, on all of them, and it wouldn't be giving them the time and justice that they deserve. So we're trying to approach this from a more focused mentality. We want this to tackle a few very specific things. Excuse me. And we we really want to make sure that we are giving this the attention that it deserves and the gravity that it deserves. So, we right now the way that we're approaching it is we kind of have a three-act structure in mind, but we recognize that that three-act structure is very malleable because it depends on all of the information that we get, on all the answers, on all of the interviews. For all we know, as we're going through, something is going to spark, and we recognize that we have to chase a new thread.
Mhm.
It's the nature of the beast when it comes to, to documentaries, but the intention is still going to be the same throughout. It's to challenge the stigmas and the moral panics. The it's to make those people out there who feel like they're alone feel like they're not. Um, and we hope that this reaches the widest audience possible because, I mean, per the CDC, 1 in 5 Americans lives with a mental illness. That's enormous. That's when you're on the subway, it's entire train cars full of people that are all
I,
living.
I would argue. And sorry, I don't mean to interrupt. I'd argue it's probably higher than that.
It is, and I think it's because there's still a lot of stigmas attached to those living with mental illnesses. I mean, for the longest time, there were, as a comparison, there were studies that showed that something like 2 maybe 3% of the U.S. population was queer in some way, but that was also during a time when those who were openly queer were facing a lot of violence and a lot of stigma, and so people hid their answers for self-preservation. As we are opening ourselves up to being a more queer inclusive society, we're seeing that number rise because people feel safer. So we can't look at a statistic and simply accept it as a hard fact forever. We have to recognize that that is a statistic that is indicative of the society that we live in and how we treat people who are part of whatever community is being discussed. So I totally agree with you that 1 in 5 is the statistic we're living with now, but that number could very well shift tomorrow because we change our perception of people who live with mental illnesses, and rather than see them as freaks or weak or dangerous, we see them as what they are, which is human beings who are just living with something else that is a part of who they are.
And I especially think, like I said earlier, well, with what we've all gone through in the last year, I think it would be naive to think that everybody comes out of this unscathed, because it was something that affected literally everyone that I know.
Yeah.
So this next question is going to be tough, and I want you to answer this, not for the team. This is specifically you.
Okay.
How do you define this project as a success? What does that mean to you?
Wow. Um, I will feel like this project is a success if one person says that it helped them. That's it. That's all I need from this. Then it will be worth the countless hours of research, scheduling, investigation, putting everything together, building the team, all of it. If just one person says that it helped them, because that's really the goal. Um, and that's kind of the, earlier I said that, I was overjoyed when Fangoria made the announcement, but then it was a lot of unfathomable terror. And that's exactly where that stems from. I'm very aware and open about my fears in relation to this project. And my fear is that I will do this wrong, and that not only will I not help anyone, I will end up hurting the very people that I want to help. So that's kind of the fear that is driving every decision that I make. And the only way that that fear will be assuaged is if, I'm not going to say when, because that's not up to me to decide, but if someone says, I watched it and I feel better in some way, and it's up to them to decide what better means, or what, if it helped them, what helped means. That's not for me to figure out, but I think that's how I will know in my heart that it was a success.
I mean, I think it sounds like you're putting together the right team, and everybody has the right goal in mind, where that's where, it's healthy to have that fear, because I feel like, that fear is going to drive you to make the correct decisions.
I hope.
I think fear gets thrown around as a negative word sometimes, but man, fear of failure is what drives me 90% of the time. So I feel like it's a very healthy emotion. So last question, this is a lot easier. Where can everybody find out more information about the project? And where can everybody stay updated?
Yeah, so obviously you can follow any of us who are associated with the project on all of our social media projects. For me, I'm pretty much always on Twitter, and my handle is just my name, at Jonathan Barkan. You can also follow us on all of our various social medias, but the best place to find us is our website, which is mentalhealthhorrordoc.com. We'll have access to all of our social media buttons. We've got a newsletter. All of the information that we will be giving out to the world will be put there in due time. It's a small team, so we'll update it as quickly as we can.
Right. Well, Jonathan, thank you so much for jumping on and sharing your vision for this project with Chattanooga Film Festival. Obviously, mental health is something that's near and dear to all of our hearts here at the festival. Thank you, Fangoria, for presenting this conversation, because I feel like the Venn diagram of people that are going to love this documentary and people that subscribe to Fangoria is a perfect circle.
Yep.
And thank you for everybody for tuning in and listening. If you feel so inclined, there's a Kickstarter going on right now. Throw a couple dollars their way. I promise you that it will be put to good use. And yeah, enjoy the rest of the festival.
And real quick, thank you, Chattanooga Film Festival, for giving us this platform. Thank you, Dave, for taking the time out to do this. I know you're very busy with all the incredible announcements that are happening, and that you felt that this was worth your time means an enormous amount. So thank you very much.
All day. Thank you, brother.
Thank you.